Most people see the name Rockefeller and they think of money. They think of the $400 billion, a fortune so vast it equaled nearly 2% of the entire American economy. But to understand the man, you have to forget the gold. You have to travel back to a freezing morning in Cleveland, 1855. Imagine a 16-year-old boy. He is thin, grim, and dressed in a cheap, dark suit. For 6 weeks, he has walked every single street of the city, knocking on every door, looking for work. He has been rejected by everyone. But John does not quit. On September 26th, at precisely 10 in the morning, he finally hears the words, "We'll give you a chance." He is hired as an assistant bookkeeper for just 50 cents a day. Most men would call this a job. John called it his salvation. He was so transformed by that moment that for the rest of his long life, he celebrated Job Day with more genuine excitement than his own birthday. Every September 26th, he would hang the American flag outside his estate and sit in a long, ritualistic silence. Why? Because on that day, he opened a small, red, 10-cent notebook he called Ledger A. Inside, he recorded every single penny. A nickel for a tallow candle, a dime for the church. He wasn't just counting coins, he was counting power. This was the birth of the world's first billionaire. But behind the ledger lay a dark secret. A secret involving a man known as Devil Bill, and a lesson in survival that would eventually set the world on fire. To understand the cold, calculating mind of John D. Rockefeller, you have to understand the man who broke him in, his father, William Rockefeller. But in the dusty streets of New York and Ohio, they didn't call him William. They called him Devil Bill. Bill was a botanic physician, or so his business card claimed. In reality, he was a wandering con artist. He wore fine silk hats and lived a double life. In one town, he was a beloved family man. In another, he was a cancer doctor, named Dr. William Livingston, selling bottles of worthless petroleum and water for $25 apiece. He would disappear for months at a time, leaving John's mother Eliza to pray for bread while the children went hungry. But when Bill did return, he didn't bring affection. He brought a twisted kind of survival training. Bill once famously bragged to his neighbors, "I cheat my boys every chance I get. I want to make 'em sharp." He wasn't joking. He would lend his young sons money and then demand it back with high interest on the very day he knew they needed it most. He would trick them into bad business deals, then laugh in their faces when they lost their meager savings. He was teaching John that the world was a predatory place, and that even your own blood could not be trusted. While Devil Bill was out chasing the next con, John stayed home and watched his mother. Eliza was the opposite of Bill, a woman of steel, silence, and strict Baptist faith. She taught John to save every penny and to fear God. John took his mother's religious discipline and his father's ruthless deception and fused them together into something the world had never seen. He realized that if he wanted to survive, he had to be smarter than the con man and stronger than the saint. He began to view business not as a way to make money, but as a way to build a fortress that no one, not even his father, could ever tear down. The boy who counted pennies in Ledger A was no longer just a bookkeeper. He was a weapon, being sharpened for a war that would soon turn the American landscape black with oil. By 1872, the lessons of Devil Bill had finally taken root. John D. Rockefeller was no longer a boy looking for salvation. He was a titan looking for order. He looked at the 26 other oil refineries in Cleveland and saw a sinful waste of competition. To John, competition was a chaotic fire that needed to be extinguished. He launched what historians now call the Cleveland Massacre. It wasn't a war fought with cannons, but with the cold, silent precision of a ledger. John would invite his rivals to the Standard Oil war room. He would sit them down in heavy mahogany chairs, offer them a cigar, and then, with a face as still as stone, he would show them his books. He proved that he could refine and ship oil cheaper than they ever could, thanks to his secret rebates with the railroads. Then came the ultimatum: sell your refinery to me for a fair price, or I will run you into the ground. Most men looked into John's unblinking eyes and saw the end of their careers. They took the money. But for those who resisted, the massacre became literal. He would drop his kerosene prices so low that his rivals lost money on every barrel until they went bankrupt. He would buy up all the empty barrels in the state so they had nothing to ship their oil in. In less than 4 months, 22 of his 26 competitors were dead. Not buried in a graveyard, but swallowed by Standard Oil. John didn't feel guilt. He felt he was doing God's work. He was clearing away the rubble of the old world to build a cathedral of oil. He had become the architect of monopoly, and the American landscape would soon turn black under his command. By the 1880s, the massacre was over. The smoke had cleared, and John D. Rockefeller stood alone atop a mountain of oil. He had created the Standard Oil Trust, a legal monster that controlled 90% of all the oil in America. He was no longer just a man. He was the most powerful private citizen on earth. He could turn off the lights of an entire city with a single letter. He could break a railroad with a single phone call. But the world began to fear the monster he had built. To the American public, Rockefeller was the octopus, wrapping his cold, oily tentacles around every branch of government. He was the most hated man in America. In 1911, the Supreme Court finally did what no rival could. They broke him. They ordered Standard Oil to be split into 34 separate companies. But here was the final irony. When the companies were split, Exxon, Mobil, Chevron, their stock prices soared. Rockefeller, who owned pieces of all of them, became even richer in defeat than he had been in victory. He retired to his estate, trading his image as a robber baron for that of a philanthropist, giving away $500 million before he died. But as he handed out shiny new dimes to children on the street, his eyes were still the same as that 16-year-old boy in the Cleveland snow. Cold, precise, unblinking. He didn't just build a company. He built the modern world, and he did it by following a single, grim rule he learned from his father. Control everything, or you control nothing. John D. Rockefeller has been dead for nearly a century, but his ghost still haunts the halls of global power. He was the first man to prove that a single individual could be more powerful than a nation. His legacy didn't end with a funeral. It was just getting started. The 34 companies the government broke apart didn't disappear. They evolved into the global oil giants that fuel our cars and heat our homes today. Exxon, Mobil, Chevron, they are all the children of the Standard Oil bloodline. But Rockefeller's true genius wasn't just in oil, it was in influence. He founded the University of Chicago and the Rockefeller Foundation, effectively designing the modern education and medical systems we use every day. To some, he was the ultimate philanthropist, using his billions to eradicate diseases and fund the arts. To others, he was the original globalist, creating a blueprint for the elite to control the world through foundations and debt. Even today, the Rockefeller name is whispered in every major geopolitical shift. Whether you view him as a saint or a snake, one thing is certain: we are all living in a world built by the architect of monopoly. John D. Rockefeller once said, "I would rather earn 1% off of 100 people's efforts than 100% of my own." A century later, he is still earning from all of us. The boy who counted pennies eventually counted the world. We have seen the empire, the massacre, and the legacy. But what was the secret code inside the mind of the man himself? John D. Rockefeller didn't just get lucky. He followed a set of grim, unbreakable rules that turned him into a machine of pure efficiency. Rule number 1. Silence is power. John was famous for his terrifying quietness. In meetings where men screamed and argued, he would sit perfectly still, watching every eye, recording every weakness. He knew that the man who talks the least usually owns the most. Rule number 2. The details are the fortress. While other titans looked at the horizon, John looked at the ground. He famously counted the 40 drops of solder used to seal a kerosene can, and realized he could save thousands of dollars by using exactly 39. Rule number 3. Turn every disaster into an opportunity. When his refineries burned or the economy crashed, he didn't panic. He used the chaos to buy out his panicked rivals for pennies on the dollar. To John, a crisis was just a clearance sale. He lived a life of total discipline. Never a drop of alcohol, never a wasted minute, and never an emotional decision. He took the ruthlessness of his father and the faith of his mother to build a mind that was part conman, part saint, and entirely unstoppable. John D. Rockefeller proved that the world doesn't belong to the loudest, the strongest, or even the smartest. It belongs to the man who can endure the silence and count the pennies. That is the Rockefeller Code, and that is how you own the world. The code is now in your hands. My team and I have spent months tracking this legacy. Hit the like button and subscribe to join the inner circle. Your support fuels the hunt. Comment code below if you finish the journey. We'll see you in the next investigation.